Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. The eruption of Mount Pinatubo, recorded in the Philippines on June 17, 1991, became known as one of the largest of the 20th century, releasing enormous amounts of ash and affecting the global climate, while also causing mass displacement and long-lasting impacts on the local population. Thousands of workers faced extremely difficult conditions in the search for gold at Serra Pelada in 1986, when the area in Pará became a symbol of Brazil's gold rush, highlighting severe social inequality and drawing international attention to deeply degrading labor conditions. Edie Williams, known for her work in American film productions of the 1970s, was in a London park on February 10, 1972, a period marked by the energy of pop culture and by artistic exchange between the United States and the United Kingdom. The armed clash between forces loyal to the president and to parliament in Moscow marked the Russian constitutional crisis of 1993. An event that led to the dissolution of the remaining Soviet order and accelerated the transition to the presidential system promoted by Boris Yeltsin. Kurt Hutton recorded for Picture Post magazine in 1946 the use of electrical stimulation therapy in England, a procedure common in psychiatric institutions right after World War II, illustrating controversial medical practices adopted during that time. Two young people accused of theft appear restrained with chains as a form of punishment, reflecting the harshness of the English judicial system in the 19th century, when children were often held criminally responsible, a practice that later led to debate and progress in child protection laws. Italian resistance fighters played a crucial role in the liberation of cities such as Florence in 1944. Resisting occupation by the German regime and its allies during World War II, a movement that weakened enemy control and opened the way for the restoration of democracy in Italy. Lo Man Hung, described as a young photojournalist of the Vietnam War in 1968, represents the active presence of minors in the middle of instability, preserving powerful images and exposing to the world the human impact of military action, helping photojournalism reach a global audience. Władysław Gomułka, a central figure in the Polish Communist Party, became a symbol of hope for reform in the 1960s, a period when spontaneous demonstrations reflected popular desire for political opening under Soviet control, increasing tensions in the Eastern Bloc. Right after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, thousands of young Americans voluntarily enlisted in the United States Armed Forces, marking the country's full entry into World War II and permanently changing its place in global geopolitics. Franklin Roosevelt, while speaking with Harry Hopkins and Vyacheslav Molotov in Yalta, represented one of the decisive meetings among the Allies in World War II, whose negotiations shaped borders and influenced the global political balance of the second half of the 20th century. Dogs trained by the Red Cross played a vital role during World War I, especially in 1917, when the use of chemical weapons demanded new protection strategies for both people and animals, contributing to advances in safety and rescue equipment in armed conflict settings. The draft lottery held in Washington, District of Columbia in 1969 represented a decisive moment for American youth because it marked the return of compulsory military service in the United States, affecting thousands of lives and increasing protests against the Vietnam War. Scientists carried out air pollution exposure tests on volunteers in 1956, reflecting growing environmental concern after major smog crises in British cities, especially the Great Smog of London in 1952, a milestone in the fight for urban public health. Dr. Evarts Graham stood out in 1953 by carrying out research on the harmful effects of tobacco through collecting cigarette tar, contributing to the scientific foundation linking smoking to serious respiratory disease, a milestone that influenced public policy and global health campaigns. Sergeant Frank Prater became a symbol of resilience and compassion during the Korean War, a conflict that took place between 1950 and 1953 by caring for an orphaned kitten. That gesture highlighted the human side of soldiers in the middle of a harsh setting marked by deep social scars. The use of pigeons equipped with cameras in the 1910s marked a significant innovation in aerial photography and espionage, especially during World War I, as a way to capture strategic images in enemy territory. Although simple by later standards, this technique anticipated modern aerial reconnaissance methods and showed the creativity of technological solutions in the conflicts of the early 20th century. Camouflage experiments for United States soldiers in 1917 reflect the rapid evolution of military tactics during World War I, a milestone that established the systematic use of camouflage uniforms to improve survival in the trenches and on the battlefield. Aircraft such as the Ettrick Taube played an important role in the first aerial reconnaissance missions during World War I, and the display of the captured German example in 1915 in the courtyard of Les Invalides in Paris symbolized technical progress and Allied morale in that phase of the conflict. Members of the Israeli forces appear with Uzi submachine guns, equipment that became a symbol of national defense after the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, highlighting the context of ongoing regional tension and the modernization of security structures during the 1960s. At the end of World War II in 1946, huge stockpiles of military equipment were put up for sale, including motorcycles, reflecting the challenge faced by the United States in managing surplus valued at up to $150 billion and marking the transition to a peacetime economy. Japanese women gather before going to the beach in 1946, a moment of major social transition for the country shortly after the end of World War II, when two-piece bathing suits, already present since the late 1930s, symbolized new habits and a degree of cultural openness. With polio vaccination in the 1960s, authorities in Glendale, California, introduced a drive-through system, administering 2,250 doses in just 2.5 hours in September 1960, showing urgency and efficiency in fighting epidemics. World War I veterans in the United States faced serious hardship on March 19, 1921, when they received greetings from President Harding showing the absence of broad public policies to support them, which pushed forward debate about disability rights in the 20th century. The opening of the new United States Embassy in Moscow marked an important moment in diplomatic relations during the Cold War, reflecting bilateral efforts toward coexistence amid ideological tension and the espionage policies typical of the second half of the 20th century. Workers were cleaning the windows of the World Trade Center in 1979, a period when the Twin Towers symbolized New York's economic and technological rise, standing as one of the most iconic architectural landmarks of the 20th century and attracting international attention. Walking through the corridors of the Paris catacombs, where millions of human remains were transferred beginning in 1786 because of overcrowded cemeteries, women and visitors in the 1930s sought to understand the impact of that place on the urban culture of the French capital, a striking historical reference. Michael Tolotos dedicated 82 years of his life to Orthodox monasticism on Mount Athos, a place traditionally closed to female presence since the 11th century, which emphasizes the rigidity of religious customs and the cultural isolation experienced there between 1856 and 1938. Alphonse Bertillon, an essential name in the history of criminal investigation, created in 1893 the photographic identification system known as the mugshot, revolutionizing police record methods and making a major contribution at that time to the treatment of criminal identity. Reichsmarshal Hermann Goering, while showing his private gym at Hall to the German leader in October 1937, revealed the luxury enjoyed by the elite of the German government before World War II, when the regime was intensifying its power and territorial expansion. Soviet punks openly challenged the cultural rules of the Soviet regime in Leningrad in 1988, a period when perestroika and glasnost were creating cultural openings, supporting new youth movements and driving social and artistic resistance at the end of the Soviet Union. Donald Trump appears in 1980 beside a model of Trump Tower, strengthening his presence in high-end real estate in New York during a period of urban restructuring shortly before acquiring 100 Central Park South, a major step in his national rise as a businessman. Sean Connery, celebrated for his performance as James Bond in Dr. No, released in 1962, became a symbol of pop culture and redefined the image of leading men in film. The success of that movie marked the beginning of one of the longest-running and most influential franchises in world cinema history. Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp, the stars of Edward Scissorhands, helped establish the film released in 1991 as an icon of pop culture in the 1990s, marking the connection between director Tim Burton and young audiences who identified with its outsider main character. Two of the most memorable artists of the 20th century, Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe, met in 1956, a period when Fitzgerald was overcoming racial barriers in the United States with Monroe's public support, a gesture that increased visibility for the struggle for civil rights. Robin Williams emerged as a major comic talent in the United States at the turn of the 1970s into the 1980s, a period marked by the excitement of new television comedy and the rise of stars in shows like Mork and Mindy, which launched his career internationally. The Hollywood industry in 1984 was living through a vibrant period of memorable comedies. Actor Tom Hanks was strengthening his transition from television to film in productions that explored the festive and social themes of the time. The setting reflects the visual style and lifestyle of the 1980s. Workers complete the assembly of Apple all-in-one computers in a factory on January 25, 1984, the date marked by the launch of the Macintosh, the first personal computer with a graphical interface accessible to the general public, deeply affecting the technology industry and computer use. The telephone and television combination shown at the International Radio Fair in Stuttgart, West Germany, in 1965 reflects the innovative spirit of the time, marked by a global technology race that sought to combine communication and entertainment in new devices, anticipating digital age trends. The large-scale distribution of the Chevrolet Vega in the United States matched the logistical progress created by the Vert APAC railcars in the 1970s, developed by Southern Pacific Railroad to improve transportation, allowing up to 30 vehicles to be shipped in each railcar and lowering costs in the auto industry. The scene points to technological expansion in European cities shortly after World War I, when Krupp, a traditional German industrial company, introduced the Autoped in Berlin around 1920, symbolizing advances in urban mobility that prepared the way for new forms of personal transportation. Isabella Gilbert of Rochester, New York, gained attention in 1936 by inventing a curious dimple machine, a device that promised to create those facial marks through mechanical pressure, reflecting the decades' fascination with inventions aimed at appearance and beauty ideals in urban societies. On January 19, 1977, residents of Miami witnessed an extremely rare weather event, the first and only official snowfall ever recorded in the city. This event clearly shows how extreme cold waves can affect even subtropical regions of the United States. European explorers visited Easter Island during December 1922, fascinated by the giant stone moai, witnesses of an ancient Polynesian civilization whose mysteries about the construction of these statues continue to intrigue archaeology around the world. Christopher F.C. Lee, recorded in Vatican City in 1944, shortly after the liberation of Rome during World War II, witnessed a milestone that helped pave the way for the Allied advance against the Axis in Italy, and came before the beginning of his remarkable acting career. Astronaut Dale Gardner, identified by name, carried out spacewalk activities during Space Shuttle program missions in the 1980s, a period when the United States made major advances in space exploration, strengthening global technological leadership and intensifying the space race. Researchers at the Kyiv Institute for Nuclear Research were developing important experiments in the 1970s, a period marked by the intense technological and scientific race of the Cold War, when atomic advances were essential for international prestige and Soviet autonomy. Charlie Chaplin, already recognized in 1916 for his refined humor and memorable roles, was one of the main figures of silent film, influencing future generations and helping turn that medium into a powerful form of global artistic expression. Charlie Chaplin, a central figure of silent film, gained enormous recognition with the release of A Dog's Life in 1918, strengthening not only his international career, but also turning comedy into a tool of social criticism during the uncertain years after World War I. Albert Einstein, famous for his revolutionary contributions to physics, sought moments of rest, such as in 1928 by the Baltic Sea, a period when he had already formulated the theory of general relativity, deeply transforming modern scientific understanding. The construction of the Flatiron Building in 1902 marked the beginning of a new era for New York architecture, becoming one of the city's first skyscrapers, a symbol of structural innovation, and driving the urban vertical growth that would redefine major American cities in the 20th century. Workers on the Eiffel Tower were involved in the complex assembly of the structure in 1888, 1 year before its official opening. The construction marked the 1889 World's Fair and symbolized French technological progress, becoming an icon of Parisian architectural modernity. Reggie Walker, celebrated as a South African Olympic champion, won the gold medal in the 100-meter dash during the 1908 London Olympic Games, an event marked by the consolidation of the modern Olympic movement and the encouragement of international sports exchange. The match between the British and American doubles teams in 1883 marked the first international match in Wimbledon history, signaling the beginning of tennis becoming established as a global sport, with an impact on the growing popularity of tournaments and the expansion of international sports exchange. Glenn Curtiss, a pioneer of American aviation, worked with military figures such as Lieutenant John Towers in introducing his airplanes into the training and development of the United States Armed Forces, pushing forward technological and strategic advances in military aviation in the early 20th century. The Women's Strike for Peace movement stood out in the early 1960s by bringing together thousands of women in the United States to protest nuclear testing, strengthening pacifist activism, and pressuring world leaders, which helped advance nuclear arms limitation treaties. Richard Nixon, President of the United States, shows a moment of relaxation while bowling in the private White House alley in 1971, a year marked by progress in negotiations to end the Vietnam War, and by scandals that would lead to Watergate, changing United States politics. Vice President Al Gore took on a central role while gathering the White House staff in December 1998, just after Bill Clinton's impeachment process, a milestone that exposed deep political divisions in the United States and whose effects shaped the government landscape in the years that followed. The Carter family traditionally worked in agriculture in Georgia, a southern United States state, and the peanut farm became an important part of their story throughout the 1960s, a period when Jimmy Carter strengthened values tied to rural labor that would later shape his political career. The construction of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York illustrates the urban dynamism of the United States in 1930, when skyscrapers symbolized prosperity and modernity, even in the middle of the Great Depression, reflecting social contrasts and the importance of the hotel industry at that time. Fort Worth emerged as an important commercial center in Texas in the late 19th century, driven by the growth of railroads and cattle raising, with family businesses in places such as saloons, warehouses, and grocery stores forming the base of local economic life. The growth of Arkansas City, driven by railroad expansion and the westward movement of the United States, turned Summit Street around 1889 into a lively commercial center, encouraging economic and cultural exchange in the Kansas region. Ox-drawn wagon trains played a key role in expansion across the interior of the United States, especially during the height of the Black Hills Gold Rush between 1876 and the end of the 19th century, driving city growth and regional trade. Ox trains, like the one recorded in 1883, were essential for transporting supplies in the Arizona Territory, reflecting the advance of settlement and the vital role of these routes before railroad expansion, connecting isolated communities and driving regional economic development. The group, identified as some of Aztec's punchers, worked for the Aztec Land and Cattle Company in Holbrook, then part of Arizona Territory, during a period when large cattle companies drove settlement in the American West, marking the height of land disputes and strengthening the cowboy myth. Couples who were able to enjoy the beach-centered lifestyle of the 1940s benefited from the social changes brought by World War II, a period marked by the popularization of swimwear and by the growing value placed on leisure moments at beaches and in public spaces. The former Airco factory in Collindale became a symbol of industrial conversion after the war, housing automakers such as Chevrolet in the 1920s, a period marked by the rise of the car industry and the social effects of technological transition. Roy presented his vehicle nicknamed Maud, the Motor Mule, in 1910, a period when automotive inventions were transforming cities and customs in the United States, encouraging road expansion and helping drive urban modernization and economic development. Rural settlements like these, seen from a train, evoke the agricultural way of life that shaped vast regions of the United States in the 19th century, a period when railroad expansion made it easier to settle isolated areas, transforming the economy and connecting distant communities. Italian street musicians, photographed by John Thompson in London in 1877, represent a typical phenomenon of European migration in the 19th century, a period marked by workers moving in search of survival in industrial cities and influencing the urban cultural environment. The ancient Pantheon in Rome, recorded in an 1860 photograph, illustrates the appreciation of classical monuments during the 19th century, a period marked by the rise of historical tourism and European interest in documenting and preserving traces of the Roman past. Children learning to swim under the guidance of an adult reflect outdoor practices typical of the 1920s, a time when leisure and the value of physical activity began gaining space in different societies, influencing habits related to health and collective well-being. Everyday life for children in the United States went through major social changes in the 1920s, a period marked by urban growth, the spread of radio, and the rising value of musical culture, elements that influenced not only adults, but also children's artistic expression. Women working in department stores enjoy a lunch break around 1900, a period marked by growing female participation in the urban workforce in the United States and Europe, a milestone in the early fight for labor rights and gender equality in those spaces. London youth in 1969 symbolized deep social changes, marked by the rise of what became known as Swinging London, when the British capital became a global reference for fashion, behavior, and freedom, influencing urban cultures around the world. Young Japanese women in 1981 reflect the social and cultural changes of post-World War II Japan, when the country experienced rapid economic growth and greater access for women to education, work, and Western-influenced fashion, establishing a new model of urban youth. In the Quality Control Department at EMI around 1965, professionals were dedicated to testing and inspecting vinyl records before distribution, a fundamental step in guaranteeing high sound standards in a global market rapidly growing with the popularization of British pop music. The Campbell's brand established itself in the North American market during the 20th century as a symbol of the rise of mass consumption and processed food culture, when its canned soups became part of everyday life, making quick meal preparation easier in rapidly growing cities. Joe Tejada, identified in 1958 and later known by the stage name Raquel Welch, represents a moment of personal transition within American culture in the 1950s, a period marked by the value placed on fashion, social behavior, and the rise of post-war consumerism. Petr Mshveniradze, celebrated for his career in Soviet water polo, appears beside his grandson in 1990, a period marked by the approaching collapse of the Soviet Union, a context in which athletes from Georgia began seeking independent international recognition. A boy appears with his owl in 1933, a year marked worldwide by the effects of the Great Depression that began in 1929, which deeply affected rural life and childhood, forcing families to adapt to difficult economic conditions and maintain close ties to nature and survival. The couple records their story beside the same motorcycle in 1967 and again in 2018, a symbol of continuity and change across 5 decades. The bike, an icon of youth in the 1960s, becomes here a living memory of the cultural and social transformations of that period. Young teenage mothers took part in innovative educational programs focused on motherhood in specialized schools in the United States in 1971, a time when public policies began emphasizing social support and flexible education to fight female school dropout rates. The rise of social instability and fiscal crises in New York City during the 1970s required a stronger presence of officers in the subway system, marking a period of intense urban tension, control measures, and changes in the daily routine of public transit passengers. The repetition of the word yes several times refers directly to the 1978 referendum on the Spanish Constitution, a key milestone in the democratic transition after years of authoritarian rule, allowing the restoration of civil liberties and parliamentary monarchy in the country. Known for glamour in Hollywood, the actress appears absorbed in reading Ulysses, the James Joyce novel released in 1922, a landmark of European modernism whose innovative style deeply influenced Western literature and feels unexpected when associated with a pop culture icon. Port Morris, a traditional industrial neighborhood in New York, stood among the important routes for urban transportation during the 20th century, when companies like Coca-Cola and local transport firms expanded product distribution, signaling the modernization of logistics and urban growth in the United States. The front of the store Osirens displays the words Dagens Fynd, a Swedish expression meaning find of the day, likely referring to popular promotions during the growth of consumer culture in the 1960s and 1970s, a period marked by modernization and the expansion of European urban centers. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.